developed state in all of Brazil, and it's got over 200 of these maroon communities, what they call quilombos. The photographs that you see are of the quilombolas of Maranhão, taken by Christina, who works day to day doing advocacy for them. My project with her is a documentary. I've also been invited by the University in Bacabal to conduct research in the Quilombo communities. And we have an exhibition that will expand out of this. So this is just the beginning of a dialogue that's international, showing that there's a thread from Africa through the indigenous cultures that links us through the Americas. Their country music, forró, is like zydeco, the same instruments, the accordion, the triangle, the washboard, maybe a little faster, slightly different beats, but it's the same culture, similar culture, and similar heritage. The people are African and indigenous and fused. They also have a Mardi Gras Indian tradition called Boomba Boy. I'll show some of that footage in a little bit. The Boomba and the Tambo de Criolla, which is their African Mokongo culture. There's many different folk dances that they do, but the Tambo de Criolla is probably the most popular, and the culture that comes out of Maranhão is exported throughout Brazil. However, the group that we brought into New Orleans, it was the first time, to our knowledge, that any of this has been presented outside of Brazil. And so, in a sense, we made history. Brought them to Congo Square, where they just cried to see a mirror reflection of their culture and feel the spiritual energy and the affirmation of their struggle for valuation. So, with no further ado, I'd like to bring up Brother Marcus Aquilana to talk about the Maroons of this area. And I want to introduce him by saying, just recently he shared some very powerful photographs of the aftermath of the BP spill that are in the areas of where San Malo settled, in Maroon encampments. What is that, above Chalmette? What is the bayou there?
We used to run that whole range between Lake Bourne, what would now be New Orleans East, and called, I'll talk about that in a minute. I'll break it down in a minute.
Well, the only thing I wanted to add before I invite him up was that, in going through all the hours, I have hundreds of hours of footage I shot out of my own pocket over the course of almost 20 years, just trying to produce a documentary which landed me in graduate school and so on. I'm working on my dissertation now, but it's not about me. The point is, I'm looking at an interview I did with Reverend Goat back in about '97 in Congo Square, and he was talking about how they burned that swamp because they couldn't go in there and fight San Malo and those Maroons. And I'm noticing there's fires burning in the same swamps right now as we speak. I thought it was a spiritual resonance of that. So without further ado, Brother Marcus Aquilana.
A little additional help, because I believe in this cause that this brother's been working on basically since I've known him in the late 80s, shortly thereafter, till now. And so I'm just glad to be a part. This is a piece I did earlier, last year, and this is a tribute to San Malo and Cecilia. Okay. If you're not familiar with San Malo and Cecilia, these are two people that you've got to know about. They were one of the most famous leading couples of the Maroon freedom fighters, what they used to call Gallard Land. Right? Gallard Land was in the vicinity of New Orleans East, stretching all the way east to Lake Bourne, which was like a Creole name. It meant the land of the braves. And this is where the Maroons made their movable settlements as they were fighting against the colonizing slave masters and the slave raiders and all that type of thing. San Malo is he was very prolific in the art of combat, right? And he was feared by the colonizers. One of the things he was famous for was he put a hatchet in a tree in New Orleans East. And he said, woe to any two-bob that crosses this line. They drew a line in the bayou to keep the slave raiding colonizers out, and they held it for a long time. As a matter of fact, up until the French transferred this colony over to the Spanish, 1763, they couldn't do anything with the Maroons, right? So this is San Malo's hatchet, his axe, the famous axe that he put in the tree. This should be famous all throughout New Orleans. We should have a 50-foot axe on a 100-foot tree in downtown New Orleans. It should be taught in the public school system about the great and the brave San Malo and his beautiful warrior queen Cecilia. So if y'all come up and look closely, you're gonna see San Malo on one side and Cecilia on the other. And I guess I'm gonna stop right there. Only thing I'll say is that in the process of doing this, I got, from sharing with people like I did and other people, I got a deepening knowledge of the adventures of the Maroons. And it never occurred to me, even though I've been in and out of there since I was a little boy, why they call Bayou Savage Bayou Savage.
Savage Bayou.
The Savage, the Bayou of the Savages. That's where the name came from, because they couldn't set foot in there with their evil colonizing ways because of people like San Malo Maroons. Unfortunately, San Malo was shot in the back out in the east, in New Orleans East, in a running gun battle, and he was captured in this war and was hung in the Cabildo, right downtown in the Cabildo, across from where my gallery used to be. But the rest of the Maroons, they were very smart. They would never congregate all in one place, and they all just faded away back into the swamps. Those people started coming out in the 1930s and 40s. They never bowed to slavery. They were victorious and they won. They maintained their freedom in the bayous and the swamps. They used to do things like the palmettos. When it was dry, they used to weave palmetto paths. They used to go up to their houses, right? So that if you tried to attack them or sneak up on them, you would crunch on the palmettos. That was their ADT. That was their brinks, right? They used to put their houses in places in the swamp where the only way you could get to it is have to wade through neck-deep water, right? And if you didn't have a P-roll or whatever, you came out and waded through neck-deep water, they'll pick you off before you got to the house. So actually, the way that they actually captured San Malo was they put together a multiracial force of Africans, Native Americans, Europeans, and that's when they finally captured San Malo. But they still never captured all of the Maroons. They never captured, never stopped. So that's all I. That's it? Yeah, well, that's plenty. All right. San Malo. They got a town called San Malo, Louisiana. I'll say one last thing about it. Here's an ironic fact of history that I enjoyed. I shared with another great artist. His name is Eliseo Art Silva. He's Filipino. He's a muralist too, all in our international muralism. And the Filipinos were fighting against the Spaniards, against the Spanish colonizers, racists, you know, that they were, and enslavers. And some of them got shipwrecked off the coast of Louisiana. It was like in the 1700s. Where did they end up settling? In San Malo, Louisiana. The Filipino freedom fighters. Right.
I wanted to offer another piece of that. I met a gentleman who's researched the Basque. And the Basque people between France and Spain are the majority of Acadians are Basque. And he has figured that out based on blood type. So one of the things that most people don't know is that the Cajun culture was born out of those Acadians learning how to survive from the actual Maroons. So my piece has been trying to figure out who's who. And I say that because the meta-narrative of who we are is projected as black people who were Africans brought over in the slave trade, but you had indigenous black people also. You had also blacks that came over free. You had blacks that came over as navigators. And in points in New Orleans history, had more free people of color than whites in the city, which attracted a lot of people. So in other words, the slave raiding was not just capturing those who were quote-unquote runaway slaves, but actually capturing people who were indigenous people or who had been here for generations living free and dragging them into slavery. So slavery is actually a much more brutal and a much uglier thing in terms of that catching and racialization process.
Well, that's it. So, you know, all I can say is long live San Malo. You know, you might have caught the bear, but the cubs are running free. All right. So, my personal mission, as a personal mission in my life, I have taken on. I would like, and I'd like y'all to help me and do this, is to popularize San Malo and Cecilia and the Maroons. I think they should be a large part of American cultural lore, because you want to. I mean, like I want to go and kick back in the AMC Galleria and see San Malo's adventure on the 70mm big screen. That's what I want to see. We just got the Red Tails or whatever they got popularized. We were able to be a part of that. I would also like to be a part of San Malo and Cecilia and a lot of other great heroines and heroes from what we call Louisiana. You know, we got a lot. Samba, Bambara, and all these other people. So fortunately, people like Mrs. Gwendolyn Midlow Hall and a lot of other folks have really helped us with that. So that's it. Let's finish off. Thank y'all very much. I love this great city.